Hey guys, welcome back to Cruise Blog. This is Allie, and today we're going to be comparing some of the oldest ships from Norwegian, Royal Caribbean, and Carnival Cruise Line. Let's get into it. These days, there's no denying that cruise lines are focusing their efforts on building mega cruise ships that are bigger and more innovative than ever before. While new cruise ships are certainly flashy and stylish, all cruise lines still rely on their older cruise ships to cater to specific destinations and demographics. Older cruise ships built in the 1990s and early 2000s are fairly small compared to today's cruise ships. For the most part, you won't find those over-the-top amenities, top-of-the-line offerings on an old cruise ship. Instead, you can find cruise ships that were built in a no-frills era of classic cruising, where most people never dreamed of riding a roller coaster, a zip line, or water slide at sea. However, I find that older cruise ships have a lot of charm. Sure, you'll find outdated decor and rust around the vessel, but at least for me, you'll find a more intimate cruise ship that allows you to really connect with the sea and your itinerary's incredible ports. I had a very busy travel year within the last 12 months, which has taken me on 13 cruises. So as someone who cruises very often, I've sailed on ships of all sizes and ages. Come along as we compare three of the oldest ships from Norwegian, Royal Caribbean, and Carnival Cruise Line. So first we'll start with ship overview. Back in August, my sister and I sailed on Carnival Ecstasy from Mobile, Alabama, before the ship's retirement later in the year. Built in 1991, this cruise ship was notably older than almost every other cruise ship that was sailing in the industry last year. I had never sailed on a cruise ship that was 31 years old before. It was a crazy experience to say the least, especially considering I hadn't taken a cruise with Carnival either in more than a decade. Before retirement, Carnival Ecstasy weighed around 70,000 gross tons and could hold around 2,000 passengers at maximum capacity. Surprisingly, Carnival Ecstasy was actually one of the biggest cruise ships in the industry when she first debuted. In fact, she was one of the last remaining cruise ships of Carnival's wildly successful fantasy class of cruise ships, which really revolutionized the cruise industry back in the day. However, sailing in 2022, Carnival Ecstasy was one of the smallest and oldest ships operated by any major cruise line. Within the last year, I also sailed twice on Royal Caribbean's Mariner of the Seas, which was built in 2003. So Mariner of the Seas was built as part of the Voyager class of ships, which debuted in 1999. This class of ship was a momentous achievement for Royal Caribbean, and not just because of the vessel's sizes. The Voyager class also introduced the innovative Royal Promenade, an open space in the middle of the ship that has since become a staple for Royal Caribbean ships. At maximum capacity, Mariner of the Seas can hold 4,200 passengers and weighs around 140,000 gross tons. So this is double the size of Carnival Ecstasy. Finally, I just disembarked Norwegian Sun after a quick 2-night cruise from Malaga, Spain to Lisbon, Portugal. This cruise ship is the second oldest in the cruise line's fleet as it was built in 2001. Norwegian Sun was the third and final ship of the cruise line's Sun class of ships. While Carnival and Royal Caribbean were certainly pioneers for cruise innovation during this time, Norwegian was building cruise ships that were pretty standard for the early 2000s. Norwegian Sun is similar in size to Carnival Ecstasy, although she was built around the same time as Mariner of the Seas. This cruise ship only weighs 78,000 gross tons and can hold 1,900 passengers at maximum capacity. Now let's talk about ship design. So when comparing these old cruise ships in terms of design, I would argue that Carnival Ecstasy's age was most reflective in its ship design, while Mariner of the Seas was certainly ahead of its time, along with the rest of the Voyager class, which just debuted a few years after Carnival Ecstasy was built. Norwegian Sun falls somewhere in the middle between these two, where the design felt like a no-frills approach. In fact, I have a hard time believing that Norwegian Sun was built around the same time as Mariner of the Seas. Although these two are similar in age, Mariner of the Seas is much more modern and stylish, while also just having a lot more character than Norwegian Sun. The Royal Promenade is certainly a dazzling design feature, even on a 20-year-old cruise ship. Nothing about Norwegian Sun's design left a lasting impression on me. The ship's decor and design felt very bland with very little charm. Norwegian Sun has a more classic and traditional ambiance, and it was very beautiful, don't get me wrong. And of the three old ships, Norwegian Sun was definitely the most elegant. On the other hand, Carnival Ecstasy's design could be best described as entering a time machine. The bright neon walls were only accentuated by the ship's dark and dim lighting. The ceilings felt cramped and a little bit claustrophobic. Even on a small cruise ship, we found ourselves getting lost and confused. However, Carnival Ecstasy certainly had more character than Norwegian Sun, albeit a little flashy and perhaps borderline tacky compared to today's standards. There was no denying Carnival Ecstasy's age once we were on board. For example, we found one of the windows had some duct tape on it, which didn't exactly incite much confidence in the ship's condition. While clean and fairly well maintained, we could definitely tell the ship was nearing her retirement, like the duct tape on the windows and seeing plenty of rust around the ship. Food is one of the most important aspects of a cruise for me. It is the heart and soul of any cruise vacation. We were super impressed by the dining options on board Carnival Ecstasy, even despite the ship's age. Honestly, we had really low expectations for the food given the ship's age and some of the stereotypes that we had been hearing about Carnival Cruise Line. On board Carnival Ecstasy, we actually found many of Carnival's classic dining staples like Guy's Burger Joint, Blue Iguana Cantina, the Sea Day Brunch, and even afternoon tea. All of these quick casual dining options were complimentary on board. In addition, you could choose to dine at Carnival Ecstasy's Lido Market Buffet and the main dining room each day. For being 31 years old, Carnival Ecstasy was decked out with places for us to eat and drink, and we loved trying some of the signature venues for Carnival. We were really impressed with everything that we ate, and we appreciated that Carnival put this much effort into keeping Carnival Ecstasy up to date with the rest of its fleet. The only dining area that we didn't enjoy was the Lido Marketplace buffet, and this has been pretty standard for my Carnival experiences. Their buffet always just feels lackluster with little choices and nothing appeals to me, and that usually leads us to other dining options, which is certainly fine because Carnival has so many. Comparatively though, the onboard buffet was where Norwegian Sun really shined for me. Although the garden cafe on board Norwegian Sun was small and not well designed, everything I tasted during our 2-night cruise was really delicious for buffet food. I was impressed with the quality and the variety that was offered in the buffet on Norwegian Sun during my short time on board. Since the cruise was so short with just 2 nights, we didn't have time to try any of the many specialty dining options that were available on board. Instead, we dined both nights in the main dining room, and while the food and service was good, nothing was outstanding. For dining, Mariner of the Seas falls somewhere in the middle for me. I've never been disappointed in the ship's onboard buffet, and I've cruised with the Royal Caribbean a lot, so at this point, the Windjammer is very standard for me, and it's always pretty consistent. While the food options are fairly standard and predictable, nothing again leaves me super disappointed. And of the 3 old ships, Mariner of the Seas had the best food in the main dining room. One of my favorite parts about cruising, along with the food, is experiencing all of the onboard entertainment that's available. Finishing your day with dinner and a show is a quintessential cruise day for me. Mariner of the Seas entertainment was the most impressive compared to Norwegian Sun and Carnival Ecstasy. This is mostly because Mariner of the Seas features something that most cruise ships don't have, an ice skating rink. Honestly, Norwegian Sun and Carnival Ecstasy really don't hold a candle to Mariner of the Seas in terms of entertainment because of this. When I cruise, I love attending the comedy shows on board, and lucky for us, Carnival Ecstasy featured the cruise line's iconic Punchliner Comedy Club, where we could attend nightly comedy shows, and on sea days, they have multiple shows throughout the day. Lastly, Norwegian Sun had very minimal entertainment during our short cruise. Of course, 2 nights is barely enough time to get a real taste of the type of entertainment on board. We listened to a live musician on the pool deck, and we attended one made production show called Cosmopolitan, and we really enjoyed that. Shockingly, Norwegian Sun's onboard theater was probably the smallest theater that I've ever seen on a cruise ship, so I honestly don't think they have room for very big productions. Next, we're going to compare the staterooms, and on all 3 of these old ships, I stayed in an inside stateroom guarantee during the duration of my cruises. I prefer to stay in an inside cabin because they're very affordable and little time is spent in the stateroom anyway when I cruise. When we arrived to our stateroom on Carnival Ecstasy, we were initially pleased with the room's size and appearance. It was clean and comfortable. The biggest disappointment was only having one outlet on the desk for us to use, which was pretty representative of the 1990s, I suppose. Our stateroom's bathroom on board Carnival Ecstasy was our least favorite part of the stateroom experience. The bathroom had this bright blue, squishy flooring. The toilet was so close to the wall that we nearly had to sit sideways. And finally, the shower just had a curtain that didn't cover the floor very well, and that left a little bit of sitting water. Similarly, our bathroom on board Norwegian Sun was equally as colorful with bright green color everywhere. This must have just been a trend back in the 1990s and the early 2000s, as colorful bathrooms are certainly an interesting design choice these days. Our stateroom on Norwegian Sun was actually the most modern and spacious compared to the other cruise lines, and especially compared to Carnival Ecstasy. We had a small vanity, a closet, and a chair in our room, although the cruise was so short that we barely spent any time in here. The stateroom also featured lamps above our beds with USB ports, which must have been an addition during the ship's refurbishment. In comparison, Mariner of the Seas' staterooms feel a little bit more dated when looking side by side to Norwegian Sun's. Our bathroom on Mariner of the Seas felt equally as dated as my stateroom on Carnival Ecstasy and Norwegian Sun, although that bathroom had a much appreciated plastic shower door compared to the dreaded clingy shower curtain. Both Norwegian Sun and Mariner of the Seas were refurbished within the last few years, and some research backs up my observation that Norwegian prioritized stateroom upgrades, while Royal Caribbean focused on amplifying their public spaces during refurbishment. And finally, we're going to compare the Onboard Thrills, innovation, and technology. While newer cruise ships have an abundance of onboard innovation and technology, older cruise ships often lack this type of advancement. Of course, this was just the standard back in the 90s and early 2000s compared to cruise ships that are being built today. Similar to ship design, though, Mariner of the Seas' innovation, technology, and onboard thrills are unmatched compared to Carnival, Ecstasy, and Norwegian Sun. Royal Caribbean has certainly invested a pretty penny into the ship's onboard thrills. However, the ship's Royal Promenade and ice skating rink pioneered the industry towards innovation advancement. Mariner of the Seas was certainly ahead of its time in terms of technology and onboard thrills, and this is still evident today when you sail on ships of similar age. Carnival Ecstasy and Norwegian Sun featured a few main pools and hot tubs on their top decks with an abundance of sun loungers everywhere. However, Carnival Ecstasy featured a kids' splash area with water slides on the back of the ship. And this was also an addition, certainly later on during refurbishment, but it was a great area for families as the main pool was pretty small and quite crowded. Norwegian Sun's top deck, though, was very basic and simple. The ship features a small basketball sports court overlooking the pool, but that was really all you could find on the top deck. Overall, Norwegian Sun felt like a great place to come relax in the sun while hanging out by the pool. However, if you were looking for any sort of onboard thrills or entertainment, this was not the ship for you. So what are my final thoughts on these three old ships? While some people always prefer sailing on brand new cruise ships, I certainly don't mind setting sail on older vessels. If a cruise line invests enough into refurbishment and maintenance, these older ships can continue to provide great cruises for years to come. Typically, older ships are smaller and able to visit more unique ports. You can find these older vessels visiting ports that the bigger mega cruise ships just simply cannot visit. And as such, the itineraries can be more exciting and immersive than a newer ship has to offer. Additionally, cruise lines invest millions into their older ships to ensure that they are still comfortable, clean, and safe to sail. When comparing these cruise ships, it's hard not to notice how well Mariner of the Seas has aged over the last 20 years. The revolutionary technology and innovation is still very apparent today when sailing on board, especially in comparison to the rather bleak Norwegian Sun, which was built at the same time. This isn't to say Norwegian Sun felt outdated or run down by any means, but more so that the ship reflects a very traditional and classic era of cruising. There were very few frills on board. I'd be totally comfortable sailing on Norwegian Sun for a port-intensive itinerary, but I would maybe get bored with too many sea days on this older ship. Finally, given Carnival Ecstasy's age, the ship was well equipped with more dining and bars than I truly expected. I was shocked to find venues like Guy's Burger Joint on board the ship, but also appreciated how much was offered on the oldest ship in Carnival's fleet. This was impressive to say the least. Overall, it's evident Carnival didn't just let the ship deteriorate over time. Instead, the cruise line made necessary investments to keep the ship not only seaworthy, but also up to speed with some signature venues on board. At the end of the day, cruising on an older ship is all about your perspective. Of course, ships that are 20 to 30 years old will not have the same amenities and design features of the newest ships. It's important to keep your expectations realistic when you set sail on an older ship. All right, everybody, that's all we have for today. Comment below if you've sailed on either of these three older ships and which one you preferred. Thanks again for tuning into Cruise Blog today, and be sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you can be notified every time we have a new video. Thanks for tuning in today, everybody, and happy cruising!